I didn't know much about my father when I moved to Chicago to look for him. I knew that his name was Raymond, and that when my mother had met him in the late 80s, he was a train conductor for the Chicago Transit Authority. He was also, as it turns out, a very close personal friend of her husband, my stepfather, who was not a train conductor but a route manager, which means he was paid a lot more money, and he spent more time away from home. When my mother told me the truth about him, she was very drunk and very lonely, but she also had the common sense to tell me how it would break my stepfather's heart if I tried to find Raymond the train conductor while he was still alive. When I was 18 years old, they both passed away in car wrecks. Not in the same vehicle, but on the same day and in the same part of town. My father was killed when a cop ran a red light coming out of the Checkers on Cicero Avenue, and my mother was in such a hurry to get to the hospital that she didn't notice the horde of emergency vehicles that had converged on that spot as she came around the corner. I was devastated, of course, but by that time I was already getting anxious to leave my home in the suburbs, and once the initial grief had begun to ebb, I was more relieved to be free of family ties than I was scared or lost to be without them. I decided it was time to go in search of my biological father, because as little as I cared about it all, there's always a part of you that wants to see where you come from, and I decided to start with the only place I knew to look. I would begin looking for him on the city trains. My stepfather had not liked to talk much about his job, and my mother always insisted on driving me places. So despite my planning, I really didn't know what to expect from the transportation system. I expected danger. Lots and lots of danger, probably someone smoking crack or shooting heroin right in front of me. What I didn't expect, though, was the holiday train. The holiday train, if you've never been on it, is the CTA's attempt at bringing some Christmas cheer into the lives of harried businessmen and the shivering homeless by dressing their employees in elf outfits and slathering the train in Christmas tree decorations. To their credit, I am sure that the CTA would think, just as I had thought, that the children would go absolutely nuts for it. But the truth of the matter is that when that bright, ho-hoing beast of a train came barreling toward us on the platform, the kids around me were just as terrified by it as I was, and wanted no part of the grizzled-looking hired Santa in the sled car. If it had been another time of year, I might have just let it go by. But I was, of course, shivering and had no choice but to board the train with the crying children and the obviously Jewish teenage elf who handed me a candy cane on my way in. For the whole of my research on this mission, I had only the name to go on, and one solid piece of evidence. A photograph she had given me a long time ago that I held on to for just such an occasion. I had decided to start with the shorter lines, the pink line, for example, which only ran until 2, and the orange line, which apparently was run on the philosophy that the sky over Midway shuts down after midnight. After all that, haggard and irritable and still with no suspects, I decided I was ready to tackle the red line. What I noticed immediately about the red line's holiday train was that the extra enema of Christmas cheer did absolutely nothing to lift anyone's spirits. If anything, it made them even more irritable. So there I was, stuck between an undoubtedly alcoholic stockbroker and a man who reeked of what I can only assume was deep-fried wet dog when Santa walked in. He was having a terrible time of it keeping up the cheer, and I was losing my nerve, losing my patience. But by the time we get to Harrison, he can barely stand on his own legs, and we're sitting across from each other on the aisle, both monstrously depressed, both lonely, trapped aboard the CTA's nightmarish version of the Christmas spirit, barreling through the cold subway with no one left but us. Ho fucking ho, Santa says, tossing his hat aside. It's not very Santa-like, I tell him. Neither is breaking and entering when you think about it. He takes off his beard, unbuttons his fur coat, and removes with a leather-gloved hand the flask tucked inside of it. Have you been in this long, I ask? That's the CTA thing, I mean. Since I was about your age, Santa says, I only do this shit because it pays well. I don't have to, though. If I tried, I could probably be a route manager by now. My father was a route manager, I say. He isn't anymore, though. Laid off? Santa asks. No, I tell him, dead. Shit, Santa says. Santa's really sorry to hear that. He offers me the flask and I take it, and we ride the next few stops in drunken silence. The train slows to a stop at 95th, and I follow Santa's wobbling boot steps onto the platform. The wind is blowing roughly in from Indiana, and all around us people are breezing in and out of the city on their way home to or away from whatever. As we turn to each other to say goodbye, I look into the man's reddened eyes, notice the same sad shuffle of the feet my mother tried to change in me. "Hey Santa," I say, "is your name Raymond by any chance?" "No," he says, "it's Santa Claus," and drops his hat into the garbage can. I watch him down the platform until he is gone, and when he is, I grab his hat out of the garbage can. I take the last look at Raymond that I will ever get, and I toss the photograph away. I board the train that will take me in the direction from which I just came, the train that will take me home, if I let it. Thank you.